هذه الأوقات سأخصص لكل ضيف من حضراتكم 5 دقائق التزاما بالتوقيت المحدد لهذه الجلسة، وحتى نثري النقاش بأكبر قدر من المداخلات. لعلي أبدأ بمعالي الوزيرة الدكتورة هالة السعيد وزيرة التخطيط والتنمية الاقتصادية.
We will give the floor to Her Excellency Dr. Hala Saeed, Minister of Planning. The first question, the Egyptian Sovereign Fund is to sell the state assets. Maybe they have profitable assets or the profit-generating assets. So how can we answer this debate? Thank you, Mr. Ahmed, and good afternoon. I'm so happy to participate in such an important session. And Dr. Ahmed, we will start first with the presentation, Mr. Ayman and me. And in this presentation, the answer will come as follows. Mr. Ayman Suleiman, the Director of the Egyptian Sovereign Fund. The sovereign funds is a new ideology in the Egyptian economy, so it's very important to explain and clarify for the public opinion all the related aspects. And I'm so happy that we have dedicated this session for this regard to speak about sovereign funds and why states started to think about establishing sovereign funds since long years. And when we talk today about economy, our more competitive economy, so this means the more participation of the private sector. The President yesterday mentioned several trajectories and for we can maximize the proceedings of these trajectories and also to inject new equities because the economies now need fresh money to be introduced to their economies. So many countries long years ago started to think about these new trajectories and these inventions to maximize the proceedings and to have a mechanism for quick cash flow. Let's say that the sovereign funds started in the 50s of the last century. The first country that established a sovereign fund was Kuwait. Kuwait is the first one to establish sovereign fund in 1953, and then other countries followed as Oman, Saudi Arabia. They have several sovereign funds, European countries as Norway, and for some time this sovereign funds were exclusive for the rich oil countries for 10 or to 15 years. After that, in the 70s and the 80s, other countries started to think the same way. They found that it is a good trajectory and it's not exclusive for rich countries, but also developing countries can benefit from this wealth and to maximize the revenue and the proceedings. Of course, each country has a relative advantage. For instance, Botswana, as the first country in Africa to establish sovereign fund, they have used one of the resources that they have, which is diamond. They used the diamond as one of the resources where they can use it to maintain these resources and maximize the proceedings for the future generations. Today, we can say that there are different forms of sovereign funds, some of them for savings, other for stability, and the third is for development fund. And this is one of the forms of the funds, and this is our Egyptian Sovereign Fund to be a development fund, and especially in its executive regulation, and to be Egyptian Sovereign Fund for Development and Growth. This is the formal and official name. How many sovereign funds do I have in the world? More than 170 sovereign funds in the world. 50% are using the proceedings of oil. So when we started the Egyptian Sovereign Fund, we've found that there is an opportunity. We always say that not everything succeeded in a certain country would succeed in our case. The time might be different, the circumstances might be different, and the potentials as well. So it's very important to study all these examples of sovereign funds around the world and to see the mechanisms applied or adopted and to see what is suitable for Egypt and what matches with its requirements. As I said, 170 sovereign funds around the world. The biggest in value is the Norwegian sovereign fund, and of course there is the investment authority in Kuwait. Also, the Egyptian Sovereign Fund, where it invests internally and externally. Also, the Bahraini fund, the Brazilian fund, the Chinese fund, the Malaysian, the Singaporean fund. All these are development funds. As I said, there are different forms and types of funds. Each fund, they set their own goal or their own direction, and that was our decision to benefit from all international experiences, to see what is convenient to our priorities, directions, and what is convenient for the Egyptian economy. There is 44 funds in USA, 33 in Asia, and 44 funds in Africa. All of them are active, although they are new, but they have played an important role in the past period. What do they invest for? They invest those are the ratios. We can see here the sectors that they invest at. We will see that around 16% are investing in infrastructure projects, and as we have mentioned in the previous sessions, the state played an important role in investing in infrastructure, but sometimes we need an investment arm to support the state and encourage the private sector to be introduced in the retail sector, logistics hubs, real estate, IT, because there's many investments needed in the information technology and the primary materials industry, financial sector. So the sovereign funds, they are involved in most of these sectors. What's the goal of the Egyptian Sovereign Fund? As I said, it's an investment arm for the Egyptian state that is owned completely by the Egyptian state, but the goal is to maximize the proceedings of the state resources and to create wealth for the future generation so that they can maximize the proceedings of the resources or invest in several sectors that has priorities and in line with the vision of 2030, also in line with the SDGs. So I attract the private investment because I am considered as one of the mechanisms that encourages private sector investment in private sector. So I am looking for investment opportunities that the state would like to avail. So I'm looking for all these opportunities and turn these investment opportunity to an investment product, and that's how we can benefit from the expertise that we have in the fund. So to know what is the best usage of these resources, and this of course is offered to the private sector, and there is a willingness to participate with the private sector to give assurance that this field is a promising one. So why do we say that it is the ideal partner? Because there is a law, a flexible law that covers and governs the work of this fund, and this fund now is affiliated to the development funds and to maximize the benefit of the resources, and also it offers the advantage of investing in untapped resources. And of course, this fund has several number of specialized cadres where they can work in direct investment and in the sectors of direct investment according to the directives of according to the directions of the state, as the clean and renewable energy, water desalination, and my colleague is going to detail all these projects. We have established a number of funds, specialized funds to focus on investment in these sectors. We have a secondary fund for investment in tourism and real estate, another one to invest in the pharmaceutical industries and health services, and we can see the importance of investing in this field during the COVID-19 because we found that there is a need for more investments. They have also a secondary fund for utilities and infrastructure, another one for the IT transformation, and the last one that had been established a few weeks ago to qualify some of the assets before the public offering or the partnering with a strategic partner. So all these are secondary funds. In addition to that, we are working on the education as well. So we are always tackling this segment that there is no governmental investments and the private sector cannot find an incentive to invest at. So investment in education for the middle class. We have untapped land, and here I have a share of partnership, and the private sector can build and operate these schools. That's why I'd like them to focus on schools, building schools to serve the middle class, where they are going to inject cash flows. Of course, the localization of industry, and this is a big effort done by the private sector, but through our partnership and providing several capabilities, this really facilitate the process in addition to agriculture and food industries. Of course, we were successful in implementing 10 projects during 2021, and yes, the fund started in a time that was not so conducive for investments, and during my session I have tackled the international circumstances where we witnessed many crises, starting from the implications of COVID-19 and the geopolitical circumstances, all the disruption in supply chains, the high prices, all these circumstances. So the foreign investment and the investment over the world, there is it decreased by 40%. So among or amid these circumstances, although they were not conducive, but there was an appeal to get foreign investments and local investments to be introduced in some of these sectors, whether the infrastructure or the digital transformation, real estate, education or industry. 10 projects where we have started during the last year beyond the circumstances that I talked about. It's very important to see. Of course, we are always, and sometimes we have the minority share, sometimes it is the cash share, just to give reassurance to the local or the foreign investor, or sometimes it's an in-kind share where I share with a plot of land, but every pound that the fund disperses brings back 4 to 5 pounds as proceedings. So every 1 billion pound is dispersed. So this means that the investments are 14 to 15 billion Egyptian pounds. 6.1 billion out of them is local investment, and the rest is foreign investments. So I'm going to stop here. Your Excellency, the circumstances that you have mentioned, starting from COVID till now, maybe this slowed down the governmental offers in the stock market, because the stock market is thirsty for new flows. So I'm going to answer your question. The first question here, it says that we would like to focus on the goal. Today, we would like to enhance the efficiency of the asset of the state asset management. So I have an asset, but it really does not generate any profit. I'd like to maximize those assets. Why? To preserve this asset for the future generations with the bigger value. So the goal today is to have efficient management and maximize the benefit. For achieving such goal, I have mechanisms. I choose the best mechanisms that can be convenient with this asset to have a share through a strategic partner or local partners. Sometimes we can give a usufruct for this asset for a certain number of years or give the management right, but to have a partnership with partnership in this asset or even selling this asset, as long as I'm maximizing its value and maximizing the equity and increasing its productivity. So this means that this is positive. The ultimate goal that if this asset values 2 billion pounds. No, its value now is 5 billion pounds. Why? Because the productivity increased, its contribution to the Egyptian economy increased, the number of workers increased. So this means that the volume of investments have increased because of the fresh money. But if I would work only with the investments that I have, this would not work. I need additional investments. This comes through partnerships or usufruct or increasing the equity in some corporates and companies or assets. The second question: why did we start this offer program late? Because it was not conducive at all. That's why the share value would not convey its real value. That's why we have now a fund, PIO, so that to qualify those companies and offer it at the convenient time, or where we are going to agree that this is the right time to offer them. Thank you.
The executive for Your Excellency Minister, as you mentioned, there is high flexibility based on your decision requirements until since 2018, and the plan that you see for the coming years. What are the achievements in spite of what has been faced by the whole globe? Thank you. I will ask you to continue the presentation for the track record of the fund since its establishment up to date. This is what we're going to be talking about, what we have achieved. And to concentrate on what Her Excellency the Minister mentioned, what is the role of the fund in the sectors and in the Egyptian economy and its biasness. All of the other funds throughout the world, the sovereign funds had different economical rules. Egypt has a diverse economy, and we have a huge part of the economic sectors that are there since thousands of years. We have a depth that we're building on top of, so we have to build on that depth and the policy of the investment, and this is what was achieved in the presentation, that the important part, the policies, the strategy, the investment strategy sectorially, and this means that we have tourism, for example, for tens of years, which represents 1/3 of the GDP in its performance, and then we have the activities, the activity like Suez Canal and logistics that clearly found when there was a crisis in the water crossings. These are all issues that we have, but we have other things that we needed to identify. So we started to provide the sectors that Her Excellency the Minister identified. Each sector of those either they have specialized board of directors to build the policy that we are convinced and directed towards, because this is Egypt in the sectors of the future sectors for the Egyptian economy. The fund is biased to development, is biased to the composite double bottom line to have returns and development at the same time. The portfolio that was built over the past 3 years, despite the increase of the interest that actually impact the capital and the bourses around the world, in spite of that, we are still working with direct investment to include the private sector inside the job, inside the opportunities that we agreed that this is our methodology. The methodology starts with the branch funds or the sub-funds. If we look at the mortgage, we have plenty real estate wealth, and this can be represented in usage. Either you're going to build for a logistical area or for social infrastructure or hospitals. You can also provide for the rooms due for the tourism. At the same time, a huge inventory or a lot of added for entrepreneurship, like what's happening in downtown. All of this is market, and we build our investment based on that, like for example Tahrir complex or Mugamma, and the Mugamma as well for the Ministry of Interior for entrepreneurs in downtown. And this happened naturally. We're building and we're encouraging and we're developing based on our suggestions or how we read the market. And again, part of it in education is the digital, the transformation that is happening today, that the students today have started to have tablets, and all of the new generation is interacting with technology and professionally, even in spite of their young age. So we're talking to them with a new language, the modern language. So the education material is sent digitally, and we have the platform to digitalize the curriculums and to also to digitalize the books. I apologize. I mean, I'm talking about the sub or the support of the mechanisms, the tools, the exercise workbooks or exercise books. I apologize that I missed the word. Part of the portfolio that we're trying to say, how can this portfolio reflect the priorities of the fund? Our priorities, we have three main ones, as Her Excellency mentioned: the increase of the unutilized assets of the state and the ability of the state, and what is the sustainability of the items that we have. So this is one of the principles. How can we have investment, direct investment, if the market today is against us? How can we be flexible, and at the same time also to provide for new opportunities that are unique through the reimagination of the renewable energy and the other things that have been found in the Egyptian economy. Quickly speaking, Tahrir, Mugamma, the Egyptians had a response to selling or to invest. We are an emerging market, and there's a lot of success stories, and they have capacities for management, but we are a market that has not been seen worldwide in some of the sectors. The Tahrir, Mugamma had one of two. Either it would be sold as one of the assets and be liquidated, and this money would go into the budget of the state, or we will transform it into an investment or part of a partnership with a sustainable return. When you buy stocks in the capital market, they are targeting to have profits. We did that in partnership with one of the foreign investors for the first time to prepare this and restructure it, and the way that we are going to do it is one of the methods or one of the things that we are following in the fund, in such a way to provide it for access for investment opportunities or look at it in a different way. This is amongst the objectives, Mr. Ayman, just to preserve the time. Are there something, maybe there is duality or between the fund and the role of the other companies for this clash not to happen? Maybe there is alignment between you and the public business institutions to have profitability some way. Is this one of the targets, or is there huge distance between you and those companies? No, let me tell you a quick example. Partnership in the bank, one of the investments that the fund conducted was the entrance with increasing capital with a local investor, but from the successful regional companies. He is what we call an Egyptian champion, and we created a partnership between a state, 49% for the state, and we increased the capital where the local investor underwrote, and he got the majority of the shares, and the management, with the methodology of the management, he takes it into profitability. So we create this profitability. It is not conflicting. We are investors, so investment should find opportunities to participate with the state, with the Ministry of Electricity or any other ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, all of the entities. We partner with it, with the private sector, to attract investment to the Egyptian economy. Very quickly, please. The most important point here is the priorities, the sectorial priorities. Three simple examples, and very quick. The first one is how to see an opportunity in Egypt from renewable energy and translate that on grounds to a track for investment and a new sector, and put Egypt on that map before any other country, whether developed or developing. This creates some sort of a roadmap to the green hydrogen and the green fuel with our competitiveness on Suez Canal. This is one of the most important things that you should build on an investment case. We as a fund, we have members with other funds, and they spoke today about green hydrogen as one of the independent categories for the managers of funds. This was an agreement between all of us. This put Egypt on that map as an entrepreneurial step, and how to create as well a product, an investment product for water purification, and the state used to invest there. Now with the presence of capital that are ready to do that for Egypt for 25 years, we can create a product with a limited number of individuals. We welcome the participation of His Excellency Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouly, who is honoring us with his presence in this session. Please, Mr. Ayman. The water purification, this is one of the examples. Welcome, Your Excellency Prime Minister. This is the example that we were talking about yesterday, an example of capital going into from private sector to bridge an investment gap that the state needs, and to provide for this capital for a period of 25 years of investment, where Egypt has economical strength and a scale. If we're going to do a plan for purifying Egypt bigger than that in any other country, even if it developed, but we have a space to do this infrastructure for millions of dollars. So attracting into this sector, this is one of the roles that we can actually conduct to do that. And finally, last but not least, the localization we have in infrastructure. This creates again a scale. 104 million inhabitants, 1 million kilometers. The infrastructure the amount of the industry and localization of technology to provide for the needs of infrastructure. This is an opportunity that doesn't come for two countries except over decades. Maybe in His Excellency Mr. Ayman Sulaiman infrastructure for this dialogue, we will commit as much as possible to the allocated times in the coming interventions. Mr. Hisham Al Arab, the consultant of the governor of the Central Bank of Egypt, to actually the investment funds in the world achieve 40% at the best case scenarios in light of the current situation. How would you recommend increasing the revenue in spite of the problems that are being faced by the world and Egypt? Then we've got most merciful, most grateful. Allow me to take you to a higher picture than revenues. Allow me to, His Excellency, the Prime Minister spoke yesterday about the debt of the state and the service of this debt and the revenue of the state. Part of it is the export, etc., but there are income other than the taxes that come from corporations or the assets that are owned by the state. And if we want to enhance the returns or the revenues or have proper governance, correct governance, maybe I spoke with Dr. Hala and I thanked her for the establishment of the fund, etc. But I think it's time now to start and look at all of the assets in the country and to have more governance, because maybe this is a bit I apologize, someone might feel upset, but it's difficult to be an operator and at the same time supervisor or observer or operating any of the companies, whatever the sector is. So from my humble perspective, the revenues of the companies that are owned by the state could be much better if it is being managed by similar to the way we manage the fund. We should have clear objectives required from the executives in these companies, different from managing a ministry. It's like a private equity fund. This is also important when I look at it from the top. When I look at the Egypt in totality, I can look at it from the deductibles and the assets. We're always talking about debt, and at the very limited we talk about what is owned by the state, and what is owned by the state is in different locations. If we gather all of these things, and least of that is the corporations. I'm not talking about land, but the operated companies in Egypt. These companies, if you enhance the revenue, I will increase its price. If anyone assesses from overseas, he looks at the revenues and he looks at the assets as well from the other side. So what Mr. Ayman and the doctor is doing in this fund, we need to revisit who manages. Are they supervisory authorities or executives such as the fund? From a banking perspective, Mr. Hisham, is it better to attract new capital to provide for investments, first-time investments, or should it be included in one of the assets that are already in place? Which is better? Both are required. So if you want to share this with someone that is something that is already there, you do that because they are able to manage. If you take a factory, if you participate, then it is either by putting capital or part of the assets, so he is capable of professionally managing this to have revenues. Our problem was always when it comes to state-owned things that they consider it part of the subsidy, and they look at it as one of the operation models more than an assets. I think it's time now that you should look at it as assets to increase whatever the partner is Egyptian, as long as he has the knowledge and the know-how and increase the asset value, then I have to participate with him, whatever the way is. But at the end of the day, you're going to share whoever has added value. Thank you, Your Excellency, Councillor of the Governor of CBE, Ms. Mona Salahuddin Zulfaqar, the legal advisor, the investor. What we have heard on the performance of the fund may be with restless assured on the work, but do you consider that in spite of the flexibility, it requires more legislation, more flexibility to bring in more partners to this fund, or do you think that enabling what we already have is sufficient? Thank you for the question. The fund provides a very important role in all of the different entities or all of the areas that we have heard about, and the most important of which is that it builds for Egypt a capital of trust. So their interference and their adoption to the green hydrogen projects brought in or attracted for Egypt projects that are interested in this new manufacturing, which naturally, or given its nature, are huge projects and actually can have a huge returns on the Egyptian economy, and majority of it is for export, as export directed. So this is amongst what we provide, that its presence with the groups of partners that can actually include companies or authorities. They all have minority percentages in the companies. Their presence would create a different environment, and the reason behind that is because this fund is owned by the state, owned by the Egyptian people. At the same time, he had an investment mindset and efficiency and experts at the national level. Most of the Egyptian cadres are working in this fund and in all subsidiary funds. Hence, they have the ability, and the system for the fund to work allows it to work in flexibility and to remove all bureaucracy burdens that maybe other government associations are subjected to. So I think that the fund plays a major role and plays the role of the developer, and the linking cycle where it takes the leading part. The Egyptian public sector can bring the foreign investor who has the technical expert, and he will pump hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to establish and to strengthen this project. In fact, we may have some legislations that may add incentives, incentives that may facilitate the government procedures and the administrative procedures. In fact, we issued many legislations in this area, but we may have legislative tools to be activated. For example, we mentioned the single window, and the project of the single window, in fact, did not succeed. Hence, the state came with a decision of the golden license. We hope that this golden license to provide, to give different approvals and to be a solution for this issue till the state will start a basic project for the institutional development for the government bodies, and to form high-level cadres. I think the problem may be in the private sector. It is required from the state
and the private sector should take 65% from the total investment. I think that the investment is focused on the quick return project, not like heavy projects like the green hydrogen and water desalination. I would like to say that we, in history, if we remember the near history, if we remember the wastewater plant in the Yellow Mountain, this was a joint company, was built based on BBB, and it was built and operated, and after that this road in fact, unfortunately, this partnership did not succeed. Now the state's ownership documents return back these kind of tools and instruments back to life. It's important for the private sector to partner with the public sector, and the private sector is to pay for the cost of sanitation plants, water desalination plants, and so forth, but according to specific conditions agreed upon with the government. These forms of partnership will encourage the Egyptian private sector to come back and work in these kind of projects. Examples: the private sector built many projects, industrial projects that exist in Cairo, in Sokhna, and in Suez Canal, and we have foreign investments has been going for years. When we are asked by the investor and ask us about our incentives, so we start to tell him we have investments in free zones and in private economic zones, and we start to narrate. He starts to compare between our incentives and between the incentives that he will receive if he goes to the neighboring countries, whether on the south or in the north. And they are competitive, and they are in dire need to attract foreign investments. So the investor will start to compare. As for the incentives, he asks me if I will export from Egypt, will I be under several sanctions under the World Trade Agreement if I export to Europe or to other countries? And Egypt is a signatory state on this agreement. So we'll find out that some incentives may form a risk. China, in fact, had a ruling against it when it issued to Europe, India 2 years ago. Hence, we should be very keen when we write down the incentive that will be provided to the investors in order not to harm the Egyptian exporter in the country of destination. Hence, it's very important to be keen, and we have to think about all these incentives. The timing is very important. Will I be able to conclude these approvals and then to start working in the project? What will be the time framework? Here comes the problem, because we cannot tell him about the timing or the time framework. That's why, Your Excellency Prime Minister, we need to have an absolute limitations for the approvals. Every entity responsible to get approval, what will be the time framework for this? Not to have open timing, because if someone is coming to invest in our country and he will be pumping hundreds of millions of US dollars or even buying shares from the stock exchange market, and he is unable to have a time plan or a time framework, because we ourselves unable to identify when the approvals will be concluded and finalized. Some states did that, and they said and they had their time framework for providing approvals, whether they are talking about industry, tourism, healthcare, or and so forth. This is among the issues that could solve many problems for the investors. We We have many competitive advantages which is not available in other neighboring countries. Hence, with all these initiatives and the transformation in this taking place in this conference and the political will to empower the private sector and attracting foreign investment, it's very important to have the biggest projects in this region, our location, our market, the export capabilities and the agreements conducted with Europe and Africa. We have all pillars of success. Thank you, Mrs. Mona Salahuddin Dhul Faqar. I would like to take from Salah Sariyuddin, the head of the Economic Commission in the Senate's House. The fund can play a significant role in this case if he was able to offer new assets in the stock exchange, and in this case, the strength will be, in fact, will add to the stock exchange. These are offers maybe in circumstances and a situation that is difficult. In fact, this is a very important question as the subject of matter with regards to the offers. This is a very vital subject. With regards to funding, we have a major problem. The promotions regarding or declaring the office due to our previous experience, they used to say that it was over-promising. Hence, it loses its credibility by time. We promise more than we can execute. Preparation is very important and takes time and effort. In previous governments, it was declared that 10 companies will be, we will have a tender on these companies, but unfortunately we didn't. It's very important when we declare about these tenders or offers, the accounting criteria and the time framework and the ownership structure. All of this needs a very important preparation process. And we shouldn't, in fact, offer tenders before I am positive 100% that this will be achieved within 3 months. This affects the credibility because we have expectations, and so people are disappointed when we do not fulfill our promises and expectations. This is a very important matter. I have a question, and I will wear the hat as a parliamentarian. This is a strategic question that I don't know the answer. Your Excellency, Minister, the sovereign funds, and this thought was in the government of Dr. Nazif. This sovereign funds is an alternative from the public business sector. Rarely we see both of them in parallel. This is a strategic question. Will we have a sort of integration between both in a certain period? Because, in fact, we are talking about public ownership with different management and maybe with different perspectives. Hence, we may not have this integration now, but maybe after 3 or 5 years, because the philosophy of the fund is built to separate between ownership and management, between the public business sector, and hence we need to have a clear vision. This may be under study, or maybe decisions have took place, but I don't want to use I will use the expression, but in the academic sense. It is, in fact, a weird idea, because we are talking about the public-private, the public business sector, and the sovereign fund will be replacing this sector gradually. We may have a sort of different perspectives and visions and different capabilities. We need to have a strategy, to have an inclusive vision that could be discussed later on. Thank you. and the head of the WAFD party. Maybe a question with Dr. Sharif Al-Khouli, the partner and the region manager for MENA region for access to direct investment. Dr. Sharif, there is a government, a generous government spending in the infrastructure with the partnership of the private sector. Figures are talking about 7 trillion Egyptian pounds. Maybe the share of the private sector is around 90%, which is a huge percentage. This provides and gives more momentum for the private sector to enter with more partnership with the sovereign funds and to have this twinning on a wider scale. How could this took place and in more harmony? In the name of God Almighty, at the outset, I would like to extend my thanks and appreciation for inviting me and to participate in this important session. Let me answer your question in 2 ways. First, I would like to talk quickly from the perspective or from the point of view of private investment and foreign investment. The sovereign funds in pushing forward the progress wheel. I think that the fund is deepening the private investment and improving the quality of investments coming to Egypt. And I will start first by the role of the fund in deepening private investment. We have many sectors that have investment visibility, and particularly in the area of infrastructure in Egypt. And I am talking about the infrastructure from an expanded perspective, not just roads and energy projects, but from a wider perspective, which include the social infrastructure, which include the health sector, education sector, and even financial service sector. The role of the fund, in my own point of view, is getting into strategic alliances with the investors who want to enter this sector and to enable investment opportunities before the investor and to accelerate the pace of the execution of these investments in a win-win situation. And in order to have a distinguished investment return for the private and foreign investment, while keeping the state share through the sovereign fund. Here comes the role of the fund in improving the quality of investments entering the state. No doubt that many investments that entered the Egyptian market in the previous times, it was investments in the form of liquidity, whether the debt service or a short-term investment portfolios. I think the role of the fund in the near future should target sustainable investments that has a longer-term dimension, resulting in development outcomes and growth in macroeconomy and localization of many industries. We, as a foreign investor working in Egypt for more than 20 years, we invested in Egypt in the last 13 years to approximately $1 billion US, and we went through a difficult situation, whether globally or locally. We were able to do that. Why? Because we are a long-term investor who is ready to be present on a longer term and looking for investment returns, coping with the long term of this investment. And here I think that the fund has a major responsibility to assist investors in targeting sectors to benefit what it is known in the circular patterns, which is not related basically with the macroeconomy situation. And if we will look on the circular mega trends that have been declared by international institutions in 2022, it is in fact inconsistent with what have been referred to by Mr. Ayman in his presentation. and quickly technological transformation and digital transformation to face the congestion in the supply chain internationally and the turbulences in macroeconomy and financial policies in the global economy, to deepen and to develop health services and to provide an effective health system to face any health challenges as we all have seen through COVID-19. And the green economy. Today we are focusing on the environmental sustainability and green economy, and we are in the state is in the process to organize COP27. Egypt has a very distinguished opportunity to be a regional hub for clean energy in North Africa and the Mediterranean basin. So I think that the investments that took place by the state to increase the efficiency and upgrade the infrastructure, it's about time to benefit from these investments through forming expanded partnerships to deepen the role of the private sector. And I think that the energy sector is an example to follow suit. I think if you go back to 7 or 8 years, the role of renewable energy in Egypt was marginalized or was on a very short scale. But today, energy represents a major and significant part the total capacity of generations in Egypt. It was all implemented by the private sector. Hence, I think that we have many accessible opportunities to apply this kind of experience with the private sector in different aspects in infrastructure. The infrastructure with its wide range and expanded perspective, seawater desalination, and this is very important. But in addition to this, we have the social infrastructure, health, education, and so forth. Thank you, Dr. Sherif Al-Khourou, the partner and the region manager of the MENA region, and for direct investment. Sami Saad, the board of director of Esports Said for integrated competitiveness in technology.
بها المثل دوما. ما الذي يمكن أن
What is the role of the fund in supporting these kind of industries and to partner and to expand the activity of the private sector as being an example for the heavy industries, the metallurgy? Let me quickly explain the role of the industrial developer to develop industry, a successful model with the fund, and then I will answer your question. The Eastern Port Said for development, it's a partnership between the private sector and the public sector to develop the industrial zone in this area. This company is mandated, and due to the difficulty of development in Eastern Port Said and the difficulty to work on land, which is in fact and a miraculous effort done by the armed forces, and when His Excellency Prime Minister visited East Port Said, now to develop this area, we cannot only to be a developer for the land and to establish industrial zone and to attract investors. We have to develop industrial models where Egypt can have an additional value and competitive advantage to attract these industries, and due to its closeness to the Canal Suez, it should be built on industrial products and to attract direct foreign investments. As for the competitive advantage, Egypt can have a big market and the ability to reduce cost, whether from energy or the human resources or the raw materials, and to manufacture it and to export it. And on the other hand, Egypt can have the competitive advantage, the commercial agreements with different countries, and it's very distinguished whether with Europe or with with other countries in the Arab region and Africa. The successful model that we did with the fund, it was one of the successful models that an Egypt as a market has significant needs for the subway and for the railways, and Egypt will buy a big quantity of the cars of these trains to raise and to upgrade the efficiency of the utility and hence came the idea of the partnership and the state representative in the fund and the private sector to establish a factory to manufacture all of these products for the market needs. And since it is an engine industries which necessitate an added value products in the supply chain, of course manufacturing cars of the train, mobile units, chairs, doors, windows, glasses. Upon such, we will have assisting industry to assist this kind of industry. We have the first contract, and the role of the fund is to coordinate with the Ministry of Transportation, as they have many needs that should be fulfilled. Hence, the Ministry of Transportation represented in Minister Kamel El-Wazir, the Minister of Transportation, to buy all these products at the best possible price, and the ability of Egypt to export to the African markets as the needs will increase, and hence the public transportation network is not available in Africa, and the only African country that has this industry is South Africa. What you have said with regards to the meteorology, to the metallurgy, the industry of train cars, and also to recall other added value industries, and also the castings that depend on energy available in East Port Said, as the gas is available with high efficiency, and can transform all that into product. And the assembly industries in Europe need this product, this casting product. Around 100 million castings are done worldwide, and in Europe our objective is to have 500 million ton, because their price will provide $2 billion annually. This is a product that we produced from a raw material till the end product, and then it is exported in order to bring foreign currency.
This idea had been submitted to the Prime Minister, and he gave us the green light to start the promotion of this industry. But there is a need for an investor and a partner, because who are manufacturing these products now in Europe are pressurized. So there is a need that the sovereign fund would partner the new partners, at least for the local component. So is it a financial partnership, or there is no objection of the private sector to be partners in management? The foreign product producer has his own expertise in this production, and he has the market where he buys this product that we want to export. In this regard, in the regard of the castings, we don't have high demand. We'd like to transform this product to an export product to bring us hard currency and to take a share from the European supply demand. Because of the pressure that they have now and because of the energy cost, they cannot produce it anymore. In this case, they go to China, India, and similar places. So it's better to move to the south of the Mediterranean, and the assistance that we will get from the sovereign fund, that they will invest in the infrastructure, so to encourage them to transfer, and after that they can resell the shares if they'd like to buy. Thank you so much, Engineer Karim, the Director of East Port Said for Development. The board directed the CEO of eFinance. So this might be the last offer that we have received in the market recently, and really it revived the stock market. So we can have expansions in equity and make the stock market flourish. This experience at this time would encourage other governmental offerings, or what? Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you for this conference. And I'd like to thank the Prime Minister, Dr. Hala, and the ministers. From this question, I'd like just to tell you more about our experience, and this experience will touch upon many statements that had been given by the speakers, and also will touch upon what the state had offered in its speech yesterday. This company is working in one of the vital sectors, and there is a competitive role that we play in Africa and in the region, because here we are working in IT and communication. So this is a very important asset for the Egyptian state. The Egyptian state pays a lot of attention, whether in terms of education or qualifying. So when it started to be offered in the stock market, I know that we don't have enough time. This took us 18 to 24 months because of the COVID-19 at that time. But during this time, we took all the observations that you have gave to us. The first part, how can we qualify you for offering? This takes a long time. And I'm so happy that the fund had a secondary fund for qualifying the assets, because most of the companies that we have in Egypt, we were not a corporate sector. We were affiliated to the investment law. So the biggest partner was the investment bank. We have other banks as the National Bank of Egypt and Bank Misr. So all of them, I suppose, are working in investment. It's not necessary that the board member on board is the one who is responsible for investment. And this point is very important and mentioned by Dr. Hisham Azil Arab. He said that governance is quite important. The state helped us, the investment bank, Dr. Hala, all of them assisted us so that we can have the governance and to have this investment part. To do what? To maximize the value of the offering. So not any asset can be offered in the stock market. What investor is going to buy this asset? No, the investor would like to know what are you going to do starting from now till 3 years ahead. So yes, we need to have a strategy and a vision, and the most important is to have an investment plan. If we are going to take money, what would we do with this money? We were so clever in operations, digital transformation, and those issues. But of course, we cannot deny that the state did what they did the infrastructure and the legislations. So when we work with the CBE, Ministry of Finance, and the government, so how the CBE and they conducted the financial inclusion. So this was very important for us. I was so proud with all the companies that we listened to in the past session, and this is a promising private sector, and it's working in the same field that we are talking about. Qualifying the assets to be offered took a long time. When we started the first time with the offering committee, they said no for the stock market. It might be more suitable. Why? Because they wanted to maximize the value of the offering. But the board of directors should agree to raise the equity so that we can have some expansions. Who would say yes for that? No one said yes unless we maximized the offering, and this study took from 3 to 6 months. From 3 to 6 months, the offerings committee, they were convening with us every 2 months, and of course this was another burden, and they were setting the goals for us. When we started this, we restructured the company. I was lucky to be responsible pre-offering and post-offering. So there were managers that didn't like stock market, and they said, we are good, we have good profits, and at the end of each year we get our bonus. So in this case, when it is offered in the stock market, we are able to split the shares, especially the financials. So of course, in the stock market there should be transparency and governance. And before offering, you go to the financial authority to give them all the figures. So there are very important regulations and rules, and of course it consumes great effort from the management. If we couldn't restructure ourselves to have an investment sector and focusing on operations from investment perspective, we couldn't do that. So it's not only about the number of customers. Those two parts were quite important, were extremely important, and the intervention of the fund to qualify was very important. And the second part, it's not only about going to the stock market, but yes, we are successful, and we didn't expect this success, and this is because of the timing. We were always concerned about the timing. All of us were afraid, but the most important thing that when there is a potential in a certain sector and it is sounding or resonating everywhere, this means that there are accomplishments that have been done. And the last point, the fund is focusing on the development aspect. After the offering, the fund worked with us. The secondary, strategically, the state has a share in e-finance. So it's not only about offering, but what still remained with us is the strategic investment, as Agnes said. So the strategic investor is not just to invest some money and get his profit, but it will give an investment perspective. So yes, the Egyptian market is expanding in the electronic payments, and the CBE is helping a lot. But the most important thing that this model should expand outside Africa. So how the fund is helping in this strategic funding, the fund to work outside Africa, not only to generate more job opportunities, but to have investments from outside Africa. The role of the fund is not only for offerings. I'd like to differentiate here between offering and that those companies are assets that we can benefit from in terms of FDI, and as our colleagues said, those assets can be maximized on the long term. Thank you, Mr. Ibrahim Serhan, the Managing Director of eFinance. Mr. Bishoy Azmi, the Executive Manager of EHCC. Some experiences can replicate experiences from the international ones. So how can we replicate an experience? How can we facilitate the work as you have seen in other practices? I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so proud to be here. But I have been based for more than 35 years outside Egypt and the Gulf, specifically in UAE. We have worked in many markets where the government is playing a positive role. One of the distinctive examples is Dubai or UAE. We, as a real estate developer or a partner from the private sector, yes, it's always very comfortable when we work with the government, especially if we are working with the government-related entities. those companies, they mix between the best thing in the private sector and the best thing in the public sector. So when we heard that there is a sovereign fund that will start in Egypt, yeah, really this made us all optimistic and gave us the feeling that this is a positive partner for the economic plan on the long term. Through our work with some entities as the Sovereign Fund, yes, we know that there are some companies in UAE who are working as real estate developers, and these are state-owned, and after that they offer these companies in the stock market. In this case, they get the fresh money, as Dr. Hala said. So the state, in this case, can offer successful enterprises till we reach the extreme end, as the Norwegian sovereign fund, where he owns 1% of all the listed shares in the world. So the Egyptian Sovereign Fund is a very good start. We are so happy to deal with the fund, and yes, this would be great, because now there is a term used by some economists, especially in Harvard University, called weaponization of capital. So supposedly that the state is using the capital to reach any goal. So if there is a sovereign fund that owns assets, there should be a plan to weaponize the equity, whether to take us to any direction, whether we would like to recruit certain people in certain regard, or to have certain financial capabilities. So this capital has the ability to be patient. So sometimes there is a plan that might last 4, 5 to 6 years, and the results are great on the long term. Thank you, Mr. Bishoy Azmi, the Director of ESDG. Mohammed Al-Amin Mansour, the Director of Infinity for Renewable Energy. Egypt is about to inaugurate COP27. There are two important factors. The cheap technology to harvest the energy from wind and solar. So how can the fund, from your point of view, can develop such projects so that we can have renewable energy production projects, and Egypt can play its role as a regional hub? Thank you so much for this invitation. First, to make sure that all these projects are ongoing, there should be a long-term, clear plan. And the Benban solar project was a great project, but it stopped after that. What we need a 15 to 20 years plan, so we can know every year what are the capacities required to be introduced to the network, so we can plan ahead and achieve this goal. This is a point. Another point, with the sovereign fund, we have discussed the infrastructure of the electric taxi. And I hope that this project would be beneficial, and this will improve the environment and the citizens' health. My personal point of view, there should be continuation. For instance, the program of water desalination. Yes, this program would be a successful one, because we know the direction of this program for the next 30 years. As for the renewable energy, the wind and solar energy, energy security now is not about the gas or the oil. No, the components of these projects, where are they manufactured? For instance, if all these products are manufactured in China, the components used for wind energy, or let's say that China would not export all these components because they need it on the local level. Suddenly we'll find that all these projects are not working because we don't have the components. The most important thing is to have a long-term plan so that as developers we can work on producing such components to ensure our independence. So yes, we have the willingness here in the region to continue in these products. Thank you so much, Mr. Mansour, the head of Infinity for Renewable Energy. Dr. Hossein Issa, the former director of Ain Shams University and the head of the Balance Committee in the House of Representatives. There is the state ownership policy document, and the main or the ultimate goal is to encourage private sector. What is your recommendation, Dr. Hussein, in this regard, to speed up the harmonizing between the fund and the private sector, or to speed up the investment process in Egypt? Prime Minister, Excellency, the ministries, of course there is a close relation between the state ownership policy document and the sovereign fund. The document will be inaugurated tomorrow. There are some activities where the state will going to exit it completely or partially, and I think that the Egyptian Sovereign Fund will play an important role. If there is a governmental company that the state will exit, it has to be qualified completely from the technical, administrative, and document aspects. So the assessment, how much is the worth to sell. So we have several ways of selling, and we should resort to the just value. Also, the exit procedures itself. I think the fund has the competencies that can help in taking such procedures in a certain time frame. I have heard a lot from the media. They say that 3 years and we can start the exit. No, this is a very long time. The investors cannot wait all this time. It's not new to 1, 2, or 3 years. It is a time frame that should be developed. So this plan, if it is 1 year, 6 months, we can say 3 years as a maximum, but here the main point is the time frame. If the government wanted to choose another method of exit as operation contracts, the fund can play an important role in preparing such contracts and to follow up the operation of these assets in an ultimate way. And this can be done with the private sector. I was honored to be in the House of Representatives when we issued this law, and Dr. Hala has been there in these long discussions. The Sovereign Fund today is playing a very important role in implementing the strategic vision of the state, and some assets had been marketed to other funds. The Norwegian funds, who is managing assets with $1 trillion, will be our partner in a fishery project. So the loan will be with the concessional articles. The main thing, they approved that after knowing that we have a sovereign fund in Egypt. So the application of the state ownership policy document will play a major role, and I think that this can restructure the investment bank. We are going to announce the strategy of the restructuring shortly, and there will be a great partnership with the Sovereign Fund and the National Investment Bank. Thank you, Dr. Hussein Issa, the director of Banha University. Madam Sahar Atiyah, the distinguished House representative member. For sure, the development of the legislations and laws is quite important. So an entity like the Sovereign Fund, does it need more legislative flexibility to deal with other funds or to take the lead of initiatives to deal with external funds, or what we have is suffice? Before answering your question, first I'd like to congratulate the Prime Minister and Dr. Hala for organizing this meeting 2 weeks just before the COP. And yes, this is really a very tiring job. So let me say that the Egyptian assets that we have, this is the real wealth that we have. And according to the mandate, so I'm asking whether do we need more legislations? What I have in my mind are two questions. Who is managing all the state assets? Because they are all related to each other. Of course, the fund is managing some of them. But today, when I say that I have companies, airports, ports, infrastructure, Egypt Air, I have many things. So those, there should be a coordination between all of them. So who is managing? And in this case, I should have a database or a list. This list should be categorized. What are the untapped at all, especially that we find that the untapped is many. We have the natural assets as the mountains and the landscape, and there are other things that are misused, and also we have many things that are used shyly. It can be more efficient. So this categorization should be done. And also to determine who owns what, because there are many assets and diverse. So of course, each one has his own target. The investment is there always, but the development is not always there. So those assets, yes, they are useful because this is the future generation rights, and we should preserve it for them. Yes, these assets should generate revenue, but also it should support the development the state is doing now, whether developing existing cities or building new ones. And we have seen many successful models, such as what we did in Ain al-Sira, the lake in Ain al-Sira. Yes, there is development now in the area. So those hubs really can generate profits.
And to go back to the strategic asset once again as a term. So this is actually important. I wanted to concentrate also on 2 points. The issue of the end product that I have in these assets, not only to have a classification of such, but also to have a plan. So we have the new capital is being established, and all of these ministries are going to be moved. So what are we going to do in that block? We need to wait. We don't have to wait until it's vacant and then start to do. We have to have master plans. And it should be linked as well with the assets surrounding. So today If we look at Khedivi, Cairo, and the Nile, and downtown, there's a lot of connections. So this coordination is actually important and necessary, and I deem that it has to be done quickly. This makes me say that there are successful models even for certain areas. We have castles, we have a lot of things and villas in areas. Of course, given my job, I travel all of the governorates, and I've seen some of the areas that are considered assets that are even, I can give you a list of such, and these assets are not used or not utilized at all, and it suffers, of course, because it is even a burden whether on the government or even on the governorates or on the municipalities. So today, in order for me to overcome this, I have to bring in the investors, and the investors are grades. Thank you, Ms. Sahar Atiyah, the parliamentary member. We have a little time. I'll give the opportunity for whoever wants to comment. Allow me first to comment. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Minister of Planning, and our colleagues in the fund, and all of the dear participants. I'd like to welcome you all, and allow me in some telegraphic messages based on the interventions that you kindly provided, allow me to answer some of the questions. The issue on, I think Dr. Hani mentioned this, some of the governments before me know, even us as a government, we set our plan for such, and we said that we were targeting a definite number and a specific number, but at the end of the day, what is the objective behind that? The benefit of the assets of the state and the growth of this benefit by providing it, because the objective then becomes giving an opportunity, of course, primarily to the citizens to participate, or even to the private sector to work with us and to increase his efficiency and the efficiency of this asset that we are providing, but also at the same time to achieve the optimum return for the state from such. And therefore, what controls it is the circumstances of the bourse and the capital market in general, which actually monitors that or controls it. And what helps us is not us as governmental people, but also specialized investment banks. They recommend and say choose the right time. As Mr. Ibrahim Sarhan just mentioned, e-finance, for example, when we provided it, and therefore we need to consider. For the past 3 years, we have been special circumstances, 20, the bourse, COVID, and what was happening since that time, and all of the bourses are facing difficulties, especially the Egyptian one, from issues and problems. So we need to choose the right time for doing that. But at the same time, again, let me say that this does not hinder us from preparing a huge number of companies, because when we're talking about preliminary, like e-finance, for example, this requires work that probably requires a year prior to that for someone to come and assess it in the correct way, since it hasn't been done before. So this takes a long time, sometimes a year, and sometimes even more. So this period of time, we have to do the knowledgeable inspection or the manageable assessment to arrive at the optimum figure. Actually, we are working on this, but we haven't been announcing on a lot of companies today to make sure that this is available on time, but we need to assure, again, we need to choose the right time. So when I have these companies placed, we get the best price. Otherwise, the citizen is going to hold us responsible as a government and ask us, why are you going to release an asset at a low rate where it could have been betterly provided? Again, for the fund, and I know that Her Excellency the Minister is the head of the fund, and you mentioned the situation. The objective, as the law mentions, is to enhance the usage of the assets of the state, and therefore the vision that we have been working according to is to start gradually. Let's start gradually with the easiest and what we can say, call them quick wins, to be able to ensure the effectiveness of the role of the fund. And that's why we transferred a number of assets such as what Dr. Sahar was mentioning, like Tahrir, and it was successful, and we started to ensure the effectiveness, and we have a number of other assets that are now in the hands of the fund, and we're always adding to those assets to add them to the fund, because he has flexibility much more than any other entity in the state, and that was the objective of its establishment, to give him this flexibility to ensure the growth of those assets and go into partnerships with the private sector or even direct investment, so that he would be responsible for that when we came here. The second thing is that we have the grand projects that the state has been providing in infrastructure, and specifically in green hydrogen and the seawater purification, because again these are all greenfield projects, and therefore we're capable today of leaving it up to the fund to manage and to utilize all of the benefits in the law, according to its law, to provide these projects and to grow the benefit and the best return for the state and the society as well. The third part, and this is also another direction, is to transfer all of the, we're not talking about assets, we're talking about companies here that are owned by the state, to the fund, again, to be able to prepare it for the partnership with the private sector or to optimize the benefit. And let me say that this is the most difficult part, and you mentioned specifically the public companies. You know, Dr. Hani, we have companies that are under 203 law 203 for business corporations. But let me say, you all know the history of these companies that have been there for tens of years and have a lot of challenges within. Challenges that we have to talk transparently about, huge employment, bigger than what should have been there, maybe a lot of losses, crippled with a lot of other things. If I transfer it to the fund, I apologize, then I'm going to be delaying the pathway of the fund, because this means that you're transferring something, and allow me to say, you need to send something that has no problems with it, that he can actually run with and increase the benefit. So we need to choose what are the companies that can be transferred to achieve the objective of that, and they would be able to take these companies and utilize it or benefit from it. We are working on that, and we're choosing a number of companies in all of the different sectors of the state. We have hundreds of companies that are owned by the state, so we're trying as much as possible to choose, once again, similar to the way that we have chosen previously, or ones that have high percentage of success when it is transferred to the fund, with the restructuring and the development, that it might have partnership with the private sector or have ease of partnership. Because if I give him X company that has billions of Egyptian pound losses, 50,000, then what will the fund do? They will suffocate. That's not the objective, and that's why we're moving towards that. We have actually identified a number of companies to start, such as any investment fund in any country. It's only 2 years old, so we're taking things gradually to be able to guarantee the success of the fund. I just wanted to make these interventions, and the last point I wanted to reiterate, I second, Dr. Sahar, we know who owns these assets, all of the land, all of the real estate, all of the corporations. We have, frankly, full knowledge of this issue, but again, the choice of the suitability or the suitable items when we transfer them to the fund, that we would achieve the success that we aspire to. Thank you, Your Excellency. Prime Minister, Your Excellency, would you like to respond? Let's take all the rest, and then I will comment at the end. Mr. Ahmed Saad, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, Your Excellency Prime Minister, Your Excellency Minister, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to talk a little bit earlier than that, but probably if what I'm going to say at the very end, it's going to be direct and very short. The telegraphic messages, maybe from my experience from Asmo, the biggest in Italy, when we worked, I think that we have discussed the Norwegian fund, and I was the investing manager that I brought to the Arab countries more than 10 years, in addition to other funds. So I always had a dream that Egypt would have this similar funds, but the problem is that they always were from the surplus, financial surpluses of countries, and we always had a deficit, and therefore we were unable to do that. But maybe with the current situation and what happened now, we have a funding gap that we're talking about, a figure between 15 to 20 billion dollars annually. We're talking in addition to the service, which is 5 to 10 billion dollars. So there had to be a shift in the economical strategy that we had from financing through hot money to start supporting it with investments, foreign direct investments, and that's why this will take us to the role of this fund in this area while we are in a time of problem. Maybe the other problem that faces Egypt is that policymakers not necessarily are the executors of these policies, so we always have governments and abilities in the governments that provide the excellent policies, but the investors face a lot of difficulties during the execution due to the bureaucracy, long procedures, difficulty in obtaining licensing, etc., etc. And that's why when I'm talking with one of the funds, I know that they work with the Egyptian. A couple of weeks ago, they said one word only: you have to be an investor-friendly country on all the different levels. I believe that it is difficult to take this word on all of the levels alone, and therefore the importance of the sovereign fund is what is going to pave the way for these other sovereign funds. When they want to come into the Egyptian market, they would be assured that everything will be completed quickly, and the whole country or government should be working as a client service other than the observatory role. But at the end of the day, we're here to serve those investors. Let's say, since this fund has been established now through transferring assets and not from the surplus, then the first point it would be the monetization or selling or leaving, so that using the money that of this sales I can move in new investments and in new areas. And I definitely thank Her Excellency the Minister that I have to look at the multiplier effect, how this dollar I would be able to have 15 more dollars for direct investments or local investments. Thank you. The last thing, when it comes to the capital market, the most important thing is that the companies that go into the incubators or the funds related pre-IPO, we have an issue in the bourse that they don't express the Egyptian economy greatly, and not all of the activities are represented. So at least the pre-IPO, we would be able to look at a huge number of the different sectors that are ready and would have a timeline, a clear timeline, and there is nothing that shouldn't be sold. Aramco, Total, for example, today is the biggest in the bourse. The banks are there, not the African bank, but also Al-Ahli and Masr. If we have part of them, it won't create a problem. On the contrary, it will enhance the governance aspect. Thank you very much. And time is of the essence, so I apologize. I want Dr. Mohammed Samah Amr, the head of international law in Cairo University and the head of UNESCO execution and the previous ambassador to Egypt with the institution. So how can we enhance the role of the fund in developing the historical or ancient areas? Thank you very much, and of course, after everything that has been said, His Excellency, Her Excellency, the Minister of Planning, and I thank you very much for the kind invitation, but allow me to talk or respond to your question, and I know that time is of the essence here, but first of all, the fund has achieved a lot of successes, and I see that from a practical standpoint, any investor today truly, when I see people come and knock our doors and say, we want to go to the fund, we want to invest with the fund, we want to partner with the fund, and to tell you the truth, when there is communication directly with those officials of the fund, we find that they are welcoming and positive in their attitude. So this is something that I have to state when it comes to the fund, in spite of the short interval of time since it has been established. However, it helped in renewing trust in the investment environment in Egypt, and the cadres that we have in that fund are extremely cooperative. They understand the concerns and the needs of those investors. Let's talk about another part that you spoke about, because it's not only the role of the fund to only bring in returns on investment, but also they have developmental and other responsibilities, and part of Egypt's wealth and assets, actual assets, are represented in our culture and in the Egyptian antiquities. So investors also are concerned. This sector complements that of tourism, which the fund has actually operated in and worked. So Tahrir Mugamma, for example, is one of the examples on how there will be a tourism work. So there is another picture here, the investment in the culture or the area of cultural area and the industry of culture, which will have developmental. We have a lot of archaeological areas, we have museums, we have maybe one of the first things that the fund I worked with under the umbrella of the Supreme Council for Antiquities was that of the area of Bentolon. I remember, and Bab al-Azab, and I remember that, or we hope that the fund here also grants a message of trust to the investors in this area, because this area complements the wealth and the cultural wealth that Egypt enjoys. So its presence in this area definitely is going to be supportive, similar to all of the new projects and energy projects. I believe that they have huge area to ensure the presence. Messages, telegraphic messages from Her Excellency the Minister. Let me listen. I think that there is 2 or 3. Allow me to listen to them first. I think we have the final one from Mr. Ayman Ismail from the AOC. Thank you so much for your kind invitation, and allow me to concentrate on the role in supporting the startups. Investment in technology startups is one of the most important ones. 3 or 4 years it was less than $100 million in Egypt. This year up to moment is 600 million, and God willing it will even increase throughout the end of the year. They invest, they provide technology in traditional sectors, and they bring in investments, especially long-term investments. What can the fund provide for? 2 things. The first establish investment in this area, provide for a sub-fund like the one that is providing for assets direct venture capital funds. This will definitely help to bring capital from overseas to invest side by side with this fund in these companies, Egyptian companies, and they would be in advanced Series B, and it will concentrate on issues that the state needs to support from the resources. So that's the first point. Or maybe they invest in corporations or in fund of funds to establish a national industry in this area. Also helping the startups to leave the market, especially through putting it in the stock. A lot of companies, Egyptian companies, startups are going to be in the bourse over the next coming years, 2 years, because of the evaluation. We have excellent experience with Fawry and eFinance, and we need Egypt to be a preferred market to provide those companies with this ability, and the fund then can actually support to prepare when it comes to governance, etc., etc. So direct investment in Egyptian funds and helping them to leave the market or exit the market. Thank you very much to Mr. Maged Chawiboulos, the previous head and the head of Catalyst Partners. Thank you very much. Definitely, I would like to thank Her Excellency the Minister for the invitation. Definitely, this fund, I consider it is a translation between the ownership of the government and the ownership of the state, playing a vital role with the private sector, because anyone who wants to invest from outside of Egypt or even from inside Egypt, they want to work with the fund. I think that over the coming period that everything is being said that the role of the capital market or the stock exchange is going to be vitally important, whether it is going to be for the public sector.
And this in fact is applied in the sovereign funds around the world. And if there is any possibility, and I know the limitations in the liquidity that may vary, that may be in a capital, in an equity portfolio, in order to depend on the evaluation for the companies that would like to be in the Egyptian stock exchange. This gives more dimension to the stock exchange, and particularly companies that exited the Egyptian market. In the last 10 years, but in particular, the regional competitiveness between the stock exchange is really significant. The second point is the medium-term plan. The sovereign fund could play a major and significant role to serve the strategy of the state outside the borders of Egypt. In fact, we can have private sectors enter the sovereignty fund to invest and in projects related to food security, animal security, with important production inputs, in order for the private sector to be in fact working in the mobility of the goods that we imported from outside Egypt. And most of the international sovereign funds work accordingly. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dr. Maged Sharq, for this. This is a really good brainstorm. And to conclude with Her Excellency, the Minister, thank you, Mr. Ahmed. I think that Mr. Khalid Nusir did not talk. We would like to listen to the comment of Dr. Khalid Nusir. You have the floor. Thank you, Your Excellency, the Minister, for the invitation. Of course, I have to express my pleasure and happiness with regard to the message directed by the state today and yesterday in the engagement of the private sector and inviting the private sector to participate in development. No country will be able to fulfill its own ambitions with its own capabilities without private investment and foreign investment. In order to attract foreign investment, we should encourage local investment in the first place. Without the success of local investment, we will not be attracting foreign investment, because we are more aware of the investment and the success of the investment on the local dimension. Hence, this therefore will attract the foreign investments. We achieved the political and security stability, but we need legislative stability, because the foreign investor is coming and he does not want to be surprised by changes in regulations and organization framework. The exchange rate, even if high, we should have a sort of the future vision for the foreign investor, or at least to have a security mechanism, and this was mentioned by the governor of the central bank, and that they are studying this, and this is really very encouraging for the investment environment, because finally the exchange rate is a means and not the end. One of the privileges of the Egyptian economy is the diversity in sectors. This gives us the strength and the power of the Egyptian economy. We hope from the sovereign funds, with its investments and with the sub-funds, to focus with the state in developing the different sectors: industry, agriculture, trade and services, because all these form the macroeconomy, and economic diversity provides strength and power, and these sectors create continuous job opportunities, will not stop even after the conclusion of the construction. Encouraging investment is not just only for mega projects, but we should be concerned to encourage the investment, the foreign investment, mega, medium and small projects, in order to create a balance. And this is really very significant. A balance in a fair, competitive environment. To conclude, I have to thank the Sovereign Fund for its orientation in investment and for its investment in human resources. Many countries envy us for the real wealth that we have, which is the human capital. But the problem is how to transform this wealth. Instead, to look upon it as a problem and a barrier, how to transform it to assets, and to productive assets and an opportunity, which is investment in the human capital. Thank you, Mr. Khalid Mohammed Nusayr, the head of the board of the holding company. Now we will conclude with Her Excellency the Minister. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. I would like to thank all speakers and commentators. All were very valuable and rich comments, and we will benefit from it as a fund and as a government in the basic recommendations. I would like to reiterate on some points and basic messages. First, I would like to reiterate that this sovereign fund is an arm owned totally by the Egyptian state and owned totally by the Egyptian people. Its major objective is to encourage the private sector to enter in different investment areas. The advantages enabled by the fund for any asset, they conduct investment studies and detailed studies for the best use of the asset with regard to investment and how to benefit more from this asset and to maximize the return from this asset. The second point, that we have a big number of assets that were really unexploited, whether closed buildings or unexploited lands. Today We are, in fact, looking on these assets, and we pump capital, whether local or foreign. Hence, today we can transform this unexploited asset to a productive asset and well exploited to add to the productive energy of the state and provide job opportunities. Hence, provides other resources that could be directed by the state from its budget to other areas and fields, particularly social protection areas. Maybe the private sector is not interested in the social protection area. The second advantage, we have a big number of offerings, whether for an unexploited assets at a Tahrir complex or land that are not exploited. These are in fact in the international offerings, which put Egypt on the map of international investment. Whether in offering unexploited lands or desalination water plants, where we have more than 300 international companies from 30 countries. In fact, putting Egypt on the international investment map is one of the main advantages. The second advantage, that partnerships, whether locally or internationally, we also see what's the best partnership provide better return. It doesn't have to be financial return, it could be a technological return, because the foreign investor, when he entered a partnership share, he can add to the technology which we in Egypt are in dire need to increase the technological value of our products. Egypt's share in the exports, the increase that we need today in Egypt's share in export internationally is to increase my export that include technological component, because this will give me the ability to compete more. Hence, I can take a bigger share in the international markets. Hence, having a foreign investor as a partner, he can also give you a share in technology, in addition to the administrative experience that could be added by a foreign investor in managing the project. I wanted to answer quickly Mrs. Mona Zulfikar, who talked about timing, which is very important. We started the High Investment Authority to providing licenses within 20 days. I think that we need to set a time framework at the national level in all areas, whether the golden license will be applied or not, but this will provide credibility for investment. Dr. Hani, you talked about the state vision, and the Prime Minister answered this part. But we, as a sovereign fund, you were not with us while giving my presentation. The sovereign funds, some funds, all the ownership of the state is transferred to these funds, and other funds are talking about direct investment in the Egyptian state. When we were studying the law of the Egyptian fund, or formulating the law of the Egyptian fund, as said by Dr. Hussein Isa, we chose from all international models what could be adopted in the Egyptian market and in line with the ambitions of the Egyptian state. Hence, we made a mix to take assets and to enter direct investments, agree with the vision of the state 2030 and with the SDGs. Hence, the model that in fact appropriate for our needs and our circumstances, localization of industries. Besides that, like the industry of trains, this is an example and a model that I'm very proud of. This is one of the sectors or industries which is in fact labor intensive and energy intensive. And we did the leaps through mega industries. Of course, small and medium projects provide job opportunities, innovation and talent, but to create leaps in development, in industry, in export, you need heavy and mega industry to transfer technology. We have to create a national champion. Hence, these kind of industries, for example, train localization will create a leap in export and in industry and a paradigm shift in the technology component. Dr. Ayman talked about a sub-fund in the startups. This will be well studied because we in Egypt, one of the most important concerns, particularly in the startups, we have the talent. Yes, we are suffering from population increase, but with this population increase, we have the demographic advantage, who are our youth, and they are talented, which is a real wealth. Mr. Ayman and my colleagues in Sovereign Fund, it's very important to study establishing this kind of important fund. And as also did by Mr. Maged Shawqi in studying security portfolio, this is very important, our portfolio of securities, and to assist startups in exiting. If you would like to exit from the market, it will be one of the important matters. Dr. Maged talked about the investment outside Egypt. As the Prime Minister said, actually physically for 2 years since the establishment of the fund, and a very exceptional period after we stabilize. This is an exceptional period to pump more investments in the Egyptian economy. We will have, if God is willing, investment, and we will have a strategic plan for Egypt to go out the borders of Egypt to Africa and to Europe. The sovereign funds invest in internally and externally, and this is the real dimension of sovereign fund. Thank you, and we benefited from all interventions and comments. Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, Your Excellency, the Minister, and thank you for summarizing all what have been mentioned through the comments and the interventions. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
بحسبة الاقتصاد، والقرارات بتحتاج خطة واضحة ترسم طريق لاقتصاد قوي مرن تنافسي صامد في مواجهة الأزمات. في 8 سنين قدرنا نخوض التحدي لبناء الاقتصاد المصري، ولسه قادرين نتحد، نتكامل، نتفق لوضع رؤية للاقتصاد المصري وآليات تعزيزه وفق أفضل الممارسات الدولية. المؤتمر الاقتصادي في الفترة من 23 إلى 25 أكتوبر، فندق المأسة، العاصمة الإدارية الجديدة. خارطة طريق لاقتصاد أكثر تنافسية.